Sometimes we spend years fighting for a life that isn't truly ours. We bend, we break, we sacrifice, all in the name of love, family, and obligation. But what happens when you realize the life you've been fighting for is built on someone else's terms, not your own? That's exactly what happened to me. My name's Callum Ridgway, and I spent 7 years trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine. I married into a family with expectations, with rules, and with a vision of who I should be. And for a while, I tried to play the part. I was the dutiful husband, the one who did everything he could to make her happy. But it wasn't enough. One night in the middle of everything, her family, their demands, the life we'd built, I realized something. I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe in their world anymore. It was time to make a choice. And so I did. I walked out. I packed a bag, walked out of that house, and never looked back. The evening had begun like so many others. Quiet, with the soft clink of glasses, the chatter of Marissa's friends, and the hum of conversation around me. But tonight, something was different. I could feel it in the air, heavy like an unwelcome guest. It had been building for a while, this tension that I couldn't ignore anymore. Marissa was sitting next to me, her eyes occasionally flicking over to me, expecting me to join in, to smile, to laugh at the jokes her friends made at my expense. The others in the room didn't even notice the shift. They never did. They were too wrapped up in their perfect little world to see the cracks that were growing, the distance between us. I had always been the one to swallow the hurt, to nod along to the stories about her family, their legacy, their expectations. I had tried to fit in, to play the role they had cast me in, but I had become someone I didn't recognize. A man who lived in the shadows, someone who didn't belong but still tried to make himself fit. "You're so quiet tonight," Marissa said, her voice light but with an edge, the kind that said I was about to be the topic of conversation. I knew it would come, just as it always did. The laughter that followed stung. It wasn't directed at me, but I could feel it. I could feel how they all thought I was nothing but a joke. They didn't understand me. They never had. They saw me as nothing more than the husband who had failed to live up to their standards. Marissa's voice cut through my thoughts. "Why don't you tell them about your latest job hunt, honey?" she said, her eyes bright with a mix of mockery and amusement. The room erupted in laughter. I stood there, my heart racing. It wasn't the first time they'd mocked me. It wasn't even the worst. But this time felt different. I didn't laugh. I didn't play along. I just stood there, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. I had become nothing more than the punchline to their cruel jokes. I didn't answer her. What could I say? What could I say to explain the hours I had spent, the efforts I had made to rebuild my career, to prove myself to everyone who doubted me? They didn't care. They didn't see me as someone worthy of respect. And at that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. Without a word, I stood up and walked toward the door. My bag was waiting by the closet. I didn't look back as I grabbed it, stuffing only the essentials. A few shirts, my toothbrush. Marissa watched me in silence, her eyes wide with shock. She didn't say a word, not a single plea to stay. Just silence, as if she didn't know what to say. And that was it. I didn't need her to say anything. I knew what I needed to do. As I walked through the darkened hallway, the silence of the house grew louder. The stairs creaked beneath me as I descended, passing the portraits of her ancestors, judging, staring, reminding me that I had never belonged. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. I stepped out the door and into the cool night air. The truck was parked out front, waiting for me. My hands shook as I threw my bag into the back, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness. And as I pulled away from the estate, I felt something in me shift. I wasn't trapped anymore. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. All I knew was that I couldn't stay, not in that house, not in that life. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and endless. I drove, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the silence. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to hear her voice, or Gregory's or Blyce's. I didn't want to see the messages that I knew would flood in. 2 hours into my drive, I saw a sign for a small regional airport. Something about it pulled me in, so I made the turn, parked, and walked inside. It was small, almost sleepy, and the air felt different here. I had no plan, no destination in mind. But when I reached the counter, I asked without thinking, "What's the next flight out?" The clerk barely looked up from his computer. "Oregon. 40 minutes, one way, $200. Oregon. I had never been there. Never even thought about it. But it felt right. It felt far. Far from New York, far from her family, far from everything I had just walked away from. "I'll take it," I said, handing over my card. The clerk shrugged and printed the ticket. I was already halfway out the door when he called after me. "The flight leaves soon. Gate B." I walked toward the gate, the weight of my decision still settling in my chest. But the closer I got to the plane, the more I felt it. The relief, the freedom. I wasn't going back. Not to the condo, not to the life that had been suffocating me. Not to her or her family or their expectations. I boarded the plane, the small puddle jumper that would take me to Oregon. The seats were cramped, but it didn't matter. I buckled in, staring out the window at the dark runway. And when the engines roared to life, I felt the ground slip away beneath me. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was leaving it behind. The flight to Oregon felt like a blur. I spent most of it staring out the small window, watching the city lights fade away as the plane ascended into the night sky. The hum of the engine was a comforting background noise, a reminder that I was in motion, physically and mentally. As much as I tried to keep my thoughts clear, memories kept flooding in. The sound of her laughter, the way she would look at me like I was nothing more than an accessory to her life. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had walked away. I had made the decision to stop being someone else's reflection. The plane landed with a soft jolt, the wheels skimming the runway of the small regional airport in Oregon. The terminal was quieter than I expected. Barely a handful of people, all making their way through the slow-moving process of deboarding and collecting their bags. As I stood there, waiting for the crowd to thin, I realized that I had no plan beyond this moment. No clear destination, no idea of where I was going. I could have just stayed on the plane and returned to New York, to the life I had built, to the family I had left behind. But there was something inside me that refused to go back, something that had snapped and couldn't be mended. The thought of returning to the suffocating walls of the house, to Clarissa's absence, to the pretend life we had built, it made me feel trapped. So I walked out into the cool night air, letting the unfamiliar surroundings wash over me. The fresh scent of pine filled my lungs, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. I wasn't sure where I was going, but that was the beauty of it. I was free. The weight of the decisions that had brought me here felt lighter with every step I took away from the airport. I made my way to a nearby hotel, checking in with little more than the clothes on my back and the ticket for my flight home in a few days. I hadn't planned for any of this. I hadn't even thought about where I'd go once I arrived. But as the clerk handed me the key to my room, I realized that it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was here, and I was no longer living someone else's life. The hotel room was small, but it didn't matter. There were no expectations here. No one telling me what I needed to be or how I needed to behave. The silence was comforting, almost too much at first. But after a few hours, I found peace in it. I walked to the window, looking out over the quiet streets of this small town. It wasn't much to look at, but to me, it felt like everything. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I had always been afraid of the unknown, of stepping into a life that didn't have a clear path. But now in this moment, I felt free. Free from the life that had consumed me. Free from the image of myself I had spent so many years trying to live up to. The phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I hesitated before checking it, my heart rate quickening. It was a message from Marissa. "Are you really gone? Is this how it ends?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could have responded. I could have told her what I was doing, why I left, but I didn't. There was nothing left to say. I had given her everything. I had built a life for us, one that we could have shared. But I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I wasn't going to beg for her understanding. I deleted the message without responding, tossing the phone aside on the bed. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. It had always been about me, and now I was finally taking control of my own future. The next few days were a blur of new experiences, getting lost in the small town, wandering through parks, trying out new cafes and meeting people who didn't know my past. It was liberating. I didn't have to be anyone I wasn't. There were no expectations, no judgments, just the chance to be whoever I wanted to be. But the loneliness set in as well. It was a quiet kind of loneliness, the kind that comes when you realize just how alone you really are. I didn't have Clarissa's voice in my ear telling me what to do. I didn't have the comfort of knowing I was part of something bigger than myself. I had walked away from all of it, but walking away didn't mean I didn't feel the absence. I spent my days in this new unfamiliar town, meeting people, finding new places to eat, and exploring the landscape. I could have stayed here for weeks, maybe longer. But even as I walked around the parks and streets, I felt the weight of the life I had left behind pressing in on me. I realized that I couldn't escape it forever. The past, my failures, my decisions, they would follow me wherever I went. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to face them. I was ready to move forward. By the end of the week, I found myself at a crossroads again. Do I go back? Do I return to the life I had walked away from? Or do I stay here, start over, and let everything go? The choice was mine, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what that meant. It wasn't about running away anymore. It was about creating the life I deserved, a life where I was the one who made the decisions, a life where I wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. The night before I left the town, I went for a walk by the river. The air was cool, the water flowing gently beside me, and the stillness felt almost perfect. It was in this quiet, serene moment that I made my decision. I wasn't going back. I was moving forward. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The days began to blend together, each one marked by small victories and quiet moments of reflection. I had embraced this new life in Oregon with a sense of purpose, and slowly but surely, I began to build something that was entirely my own. The past was never far from my thoughts, but with every step I took, I felt like I was shedding a layer of who I used to be. My mornings were no longer filled with the stress of running a failing company or dealing with Marissa's demands. I spent the first part of each day running, the cool air filling my lungs as I pushed my body farther than I had in years. There was something freeing about it. Running was no longer a means of escaping. It was a way of grounding myself in the present. By the time I returned from my morning run, I would sit down at the small wooden desk in my apartment, writing in my journal. I hadn't realized how much I had missed writing until I started. It was a way to capture my thoughts, my feelings, the struggles I had gone through, and the lessons I was learning. I wrote about the anger I had held on to for so long, about the emptiness that had consumed me. I wrote about Noah, the son I had lost and would never forget. And I wrote about Clarissa, the woman I had loved and lost. But more than anything, I wrote about who I was becoming. The man I had been wasn't the same man I was now, and it felt good to put those changes down on paper. It wasn't a blueprint for who I would become, but it was a map of where I had been, and that was just as important. It was one of these quiet mornings with the sound of the birds outside my window and the warmth of the sunlight streaming in that I got a call I hadn't been expecting. It was Diane. I'd pushed her out of my thoughts. She was a reminder of the life I had walked away from, of the people I had tried to leave behind. But now, as I saw her name on the screen, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't afraid of what she had to say. "Julian," she said when I picked up, "I know this isn't easy, but I need to talk to you. It's about Clarissa. She paused as if gathering her thoughts. "She's not well, Julian. She's been struggling for months, and I don't think she's going to make it through this alone." I was silent for a moment, processing her words. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to tell her that it wasn't my problem anymore. But another part of me, the part that had loved Clarissa for so many years, couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. I had walked away from her, but did that mean I had to abandon her completely? "Is she in danger?" I finally asked, my voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "She's lost." "Julian," Diane replied softly. "She's gone through so much, and she doesn't know where to turn. She's been hiding it, but I can see it. She's falling apart, and I don't know how much longer she can keep going like this." I closed my eyes, the weight of the words settling deep in my chest. It wasn't just her betrayal that had hurt me. It was the fact that she had given up on us, on everything we had worked for. But hearing this, Hearing the pain in Diane's voice stirred something inside me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, unsure of my own feelings. "Why reach out to me now?" Diane took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "Because she needs you, Julian. I know it's a lot to ask, and I understand if you can't do this, but I think—" "No, I know. She would listen to you. She won't listen to anyone else." I was quiet for a long time, my mind running through 100 different scenarios. Diane was asking me to go back, to step into a life I had left behind. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew it might open wounds I wasn't ready to face. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that the woman I had once loved, the woman who had been my partner, was in pain. And I had to decide if I was willing to be there for her, even after everything that had happened. "Give me some time," I said finally, my voice low. "I need to think about this." Diane didn't argue. "Of course, take your time. But just know, she's still the same woman you loved. She's just lost. And if there's any part of you that can help her find her way back—" "I'll think about it," I interrupted, trying to hold back the emotions that were bubbling up inside me. "I'll let you know what I decide." The line went quiet for a moment before Diane whispered, "Thank you, Julian. I know this isn't easy." I hung up the phone, sitting there for a long time, staring out the window at the quiet town below. It wasn't just about Clarissa anymore. It was about me, my choices, my future. Could I truly move on, leave her behind, and continue building the life I had started in Oregon? Or did I still have a responsibility to her, to the woman I had once promised to protect, to love, to stand by? It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew I had to make it. And I knew that whatever decision I made, it would define the next chapter of my life. I walked to the window and looked out over the quiet streets. I had spent so long running from my past, from the hurt, from the pain, but I couldn't run forever. Maybe it was time to face it, to confront the parts of myself I had been avoiding. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go once and for all. The weeks that followed were a test of patience, of perseverance, and of self-discovery. I had left behind the life I thought I was supposed to live, the life I had spent years building, for a new beginning. But the question lingered. What now? What did it mean to truly start over when the ghosts of the past were always lingering just behind me? Oregon had been a quiet refuge, but the initial calm soon wore off. It was easy to get lost in the beauty of the landscape, the small-town charm, the comfort of anonymity. But as the days stretched on, I started to feel the pull of my old life. The emptiness wasn't gone. It was still there, hovering just beneath the surface. The ache of what I had lost, my son, my marriage, the company, still lingered, and no amount of scenic walks or quiet moments could make that disappear. The more I spent time in this small town, the more I realized that I hadn't just walked away from Clarissa and the life I had known. I had walked away from myself, the person I had been, the man who had once believed in the dream of success, the man who had fought to build a life that was worth something, wasn't gone. He was still inside me. But now I had to learn how to find him again. I started to make small changes. I enrolled in a local art class, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. I began working on my fitness, pushing myself in ways I hadn't in years. I even started writing, putting my thoughts down on paper, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, and everything that was yet to come. These were the things I had neglected when I was so consumed with running the company, with being the perfect husband, with trying to live up to everyone's expectations. At first, the idea of doing something so personal, so outside the rigid structure of business, felt foreign. But as I did it, I found peace in the small moments. Painting, running, writing, they weren't just distractions. They were ways for me to reconnect with myself, to rediscover who I was outside of the expectations and the image I had been trying to project. One day, while browsing through a local bookstore, I found a book that caught my attention. It was a novel by an author I had never heard of, but something about the cover, the title, The Art of Moving On, spoke to me. I bought it on impulse, not expecting much, but desperate to fill the silence that had begun to feel too loud. The book became my nightly ritual. It was about a man who had faced similar heartbreak, who had left behind the life he thought he wanted and started anew. The parallels to my own situation were uncanny, but as I read each chapter, I found myself starting to understand the complexities of moving forward. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it, to accept it, and to build a new future around the lessons it had taught me. One evening, I decided to go back to the place where it all began. The small cafe where I had sat with Thomas that first day I arrived. I didn't expect anything from it. I didn't expect it to provide answers or comfort. I just needed to see it again, to remind myself that the life I had walked away from wasn't the end. It was just a chapter. As I sat at the same table, sipping my coffee, I looked around at the faces of the people in the cafe. Locals, tourists, people who had their own lives, their own stories. I wasn't part of their world. I wasn't part of the life I had once built. And that realization didn't sting as much as I thought it would. It was just the truth. And I was starting to embrace it. The door opened and I glanced up to see a familiar face. It was Marco. He had been in and out of my life over the years, mostly on the professional side. But now, as I saw him walk into the cafe, I realized just how much I had missed him. "Julian," he said, his face lighting up when he saw me. "I didn't expect to find you here." "Marco," I smiled, standing up to greet him. "I didn't expect to see you here either. What are you doing in Oregon?" He shrugged, looking around the cafe before sitting down across from me. "I needed a break, I guess. Business is still going well back home, but I needed some time away from it all. I figured I'd come see how you're doing." We spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. We talked about business, of course, but we also talked about life, about what I was doing, about how I was really feeling. It was strange, but in that moment I realized just how much I had missed having a real conversation with someone. Not about deals or partnerships, but about who I was, about what was next. "Have you thought about coming back?" Marco asked a bit cautiously. "The company's doing better than expected. We could use you back in New York." I shook my head, not hesitating. "I'm not going back, Marco. Not to that life, not the way it was. I'm building something new here. It's not about the company anymore. It's about me. I've realized that I can't keep trying to live up to the expectations of everyone else. I have to do this for myself now." Marco nodded, understanding. "I get it. I've seen the way you've been working here. You've changed, Julian, and I think this is the right move. Whatever you decide, I'll be here to support you." I smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in. "Thanks, Marco. I appreciate that. It's good to know I'm not alone in this." As the evening wore on, I realized just how far I had come. The man sitting at the cafe, talking to his friend, was not the same person who had walked away from everything months ago. I wasn't lost anymore. I had found something worth living for. But more than anything, I had found myself again. The days that followed my conversation with Diane were filled with a quiet kind of tension. I knew I had to make a decision, but the weight of it felt too heavy to bear. I had spent so long pushing my past behind me, trying to build a future free from the mistakes I had made, free from the shadows of Clarissa's betrayal. But Diane's words still echoed in my mind. "She needs you, Julian." I didn't know if I could be there for her again. I didn't know if I could walk back into the life I had left behind without getting lost in it all over again. But the thought of Clarissa, struggling and alone, stirred something deep within me. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the memory of who we used to be. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the realization that despite everything that had happened, I still cared. I couldn't deny it. So, I made the decision. I would go to her. Not because I owed her anything, but because, deep down, I knew that I had to face the past. I had to let it go once and for all, and this was the only way to do that. I called Diane the next morning. "I'm coming. I'll be there in a few days." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Thank you, Julian. You don't know how much this means." I packed my things, ready to leave the peaceful life I had started in Oregon behind. As I made my way to the airport, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had led me to this point. The betrayal, the hurt, the unanswered questions. But more than that, I felt a strange sense of closure. I wasn't going back to fix things. I wasn't going back to restart my life with Clarissa. I was going back to face what had been broken, to confront the part of me I had buried for so long. I arrived in New York, the bustling city feeling both familiar and foreign at the same time. The sights, the sounds, the chaos. It all seemed so distant now. I had lived here for so long, and yet I felt like a stranger. I made my way to Clarissa's apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was going to find when I walked through that door. Was she the same woman who had betrayed me? Or had time changed her as much as it had changed me? When I arrived, I stood outside for a moment, staring at the door. This was it, the moment I had been avoiding for months. I raised my hand and knocked. Clarissa answered almost immediately, her face a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. She looked older, tired, and yet there was a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Julian," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You actually came." "I'm here," I replied, my voice steady. "We need to talk." She stepped aside, silently inviting me in. I walked past her, my eyes scanning the apartment. It was the same, yet different. There were fewer photographs of us, fewer reminders of the life we once shared. It felt empty, as if something important had been taken away. She motioned for me to sit on the couch, and we both sat down, the silence between us heavy. "I'm sorry, Julian," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I know I've said that before, but I need you to understand. I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I didn't know how to come back from that." I sat there, processing her words. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just tired. I had carried the weight of her betrayal for so long, but in this moment, I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to fix anything. I just needed to understand. "I don't know what you want me to say," I said quietly. "You hurt me, Clarissa. You hurt Noah. And I can't just forget that." "I don't expect you to," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I've changed. I've been trying to fix myself, to find who I am again. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize what I had, what I lost. But I can't go back, Julian. I know that now." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the same woman I had once known. She was fragile now, worn down by her own decisions, by her own guilt. It was clear that the woman sitting in front of me was not the person who had betrayed me. She was someone different, someone who had made mistakes and was trying, in her own way, to find redemption. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Clarissa," I said, my voice low. "And I don't know if I want to. But I'm not here to relive the past. I'm here because I need to know. I need to know if you can let go of everything that's held you back. If you can finally move forward." She looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling. "I want to, Julian. I want to let go. I want to be the person I should have been. For you. For Noah. But I can't do that alone. I need to know that you're not just walking away from me forever." I sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of her words. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make everything okay again. But I knew I couldn't. The past was too painful, too broken to fix in just a few words. "I can't promise you that," I said finally, "but I can promise you that I'm not going to carry this pain anymore. I'm not going to let it define me. You've made your choices, Clarissa, and so have I. And I think it's time we both start living for ourselves. For who we are now, not who we used to be." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, Julian. I just want you to know that I'll always care about you, always." I stood up, walking toward the door. I paused for a moment, looking at her one last time. The woman I had once loved, the woman who had broken my heart, was still in front of me, but she wasn't the woman I was meant to be with anymore. I had let her go, and I had let the pain go with her. "I'll never forget what we had," I said quietly, before stepping out the door. As I walked down the stairs and into the night, I felt a strange sense of freedom. The weight that had been holding me back for so long had finally been lifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just free. The days after leaving Clarissa's apartment were quieter than I had expected. There were no grand revelations, no deep conversations, just a calm that settled in my mind like the first breath of fresh air after being trapped in a room for far too long. I had faced what I needed to face. I had confronted the past, and now I was ready to move on. But moving on wasn't as simple as it seemed. The weight of the years I had spent trying to make everything work, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine, still clung to me. I had made peace with Clarissa, or at least, I had made peace with the idea of her. But what about me? What about the man I had become in the process of losing everything? I spent the next few weeks diving deeper into the work I had been doing, rebuilding my company, finding new clients, drafting plans for the future. But something had shifted. I was no longer just going through the motions. I was creating something real, something that reflected who I was now, not who I used to be. Every deal I signed, every partnership I formed, was a step toward a future that was entirely mine. One afternoon, I took a break from the office, needing some fresh air. I walked down the familiar streets of the city, the places that used to feel like home, but now they felt different. There was a distance between me and the life I had left behind, but that was okay. I had finally come to terms with it. As I walked, I saw a familiar face in a cafe window. It was Thomas, the friend I hadn't seen since before everything fell apart. He was sitting alone at a table, his eyes scanning something on his laptop. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether I should interrupt him, but something in me told me I should. So, I pushed open the door and walked inside. "Thomas," I said, my voice uncertain, but filled with relief. "Long time no see." He looked up, his expression brightening immediately. "Julian, I didn't expect to see you here. Come, sit. What's been going on with you?" I slid into the seat across from him, suddenly feeling a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying slip off my shoulders. I didn't know why, but being in Thomas's company felt like a small victory, like a reminder that the world hadn't completely turned its back on me. "I've been working a lot," I said, my tone casual but with a hint of weariness. "The company's doing well. It's different now. Everything's different." Thomas raised an eyebrow, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. "It's good to hear the company's doing well. But what about you, Julian? How are you doing?" I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. For so long, I had been focused on the company, on rebuilding everything that had been lost, that I hadn't stopped to think about myself. I had been avoiding that question for months, pushing it aside in favor of doing the work. But Thomas's question hit me like a splash of cold water. "I'm figuring it out," I said slowly, my voice unsteady for the first time in a while. "I thought I was fine, but the more I work, the more I realize that there's still so much I need to process. The past, everything that happened with Clarissa. I thought I could leave it all behind, but I don't think that's how it works. It's still a part of me." Thomas nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "It's not easy, man. You can't just bury all of that and expect it to go away. It's a process. You're not going to wake up one day and feel like everything is perfect, but you've made huge strides already. You walked away from something that wasn't right for you, and that takes courage." I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words settle in. "I walked away, yeah, but I don't know if I'm ready for what's next. I'm still trying to figure out who I am without everything that came with that life. I don't know what that looks like." Thomas leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, his eyes thoughtful. "Maybe you don't need to know what it looks like right away. Maybe it's enough that you're taking it one step at a time. You don't have to have it all figured out. The important thing is that you're moving forward, not staying stuck in the past." His words hit me harder than I had expected. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being willing to take those small steps, to keep moving forward, no matter how uncertain the road ahead seemed. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding on to the idea of who I used to be. The man who had everything, who had built something from nothing. The man who had been a partner, a businessman, a husband. But that man wasn't who I was anymore. I was still figuring out who I was, but I didn't need to rush it. I had time. The rest of the conversation passed in a blur. We talked about old times, about business, about life. And when I stood to leave, I felt lighter. The uncertainty still lingered, but it no longer had a hold on me. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't need to. As I walked back to my apartment that night, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of the unknown, of the future. I wasn't afraid of what I had lost because I had already let it go. The city felt different now. The streets I had once walked with regret were now filled with possibility. Every corner, every block held something new, something I could create, something I could shape. I had done the hardest part. I had faced my demons, and I had walked away from the life that no longer served me. Now, it was time to build a future that was truly mine. The weeks after my conversation with Thomas felt like a turning point. I had been moving forward one step at a time, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't just recovering from the past anymore. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was evolving. And though the future was still uncertain, I could feel the momentum of change pushing me forward, like the tide of the ocean pulling me towards something greater. But even as things in my life were starting to feel like they were falling into place, I knew the hardest decision was still ahead of me. I had been running away from the truth for months, from the things I hadn't fully faced. And now it was time to confront it head on. I received another call from Diane one evening. This time, her voice more urgent than I had ever heard it before. "Julian, you need to come to New York. It's about Clarissa. She's in trouble. She's not doing well." I stood there, the weight of her words settling deep inside me. "What happened?" Diane's voice was filled with emotion. "She's been spiraling. She's in the hospital, Julian. It's bad. She won't talk to anyone but you. Please come back. She needs you." The words hung in the air, suspended between us. I didn't know what to feel. My heart was racing. Half of me wanted to turn away, to keep running toward the life I had started to rebuild in Oregon. The other half, the part of me that had loved Clarissa, wanted to help her. Even after everything, I wanted to make sure she was okay. I took a deep breath, staring out the window of my apartment. I had walked away once. Could I really go back? Was I strong enough to face her again? To face the woman who had shattered me? I didn't have an answer, but I knew what I had to do. I couldn't leave this chapter of my life unfinished. I couldn't leave things unresolved. So I booked a flight to New York and prepared myself for whatever was waiting there. It wasn't about saving Clarissa. It wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about closure. It was about letting go, finally. The flight felt long, the hours stretching on like a slow march towards something I couldn't predict. My thoughts kept returning to Clarissa, to the life we had shared, to the pain, and to Noah, whose absence had left a permanent hole in my heart. Could I really go back and face everything again? When I landed, I was greeted by Diane at the airport, her face filled with concern. She didn't say much, just led me to a cab, her hands trembling as she gave the driver the address. We didn't speak much on the drive to the hospital. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. As we arrived at the hospital, I could feel the cold air biting at my skin, the weight of the situation settling in. I followed Diane through the sterile, silent halls, each step heavier than the last. We stopped outside a room and Diane turned to me with a sad look in her eyes. "She's in there," she said softly. "Just be patient with her, Julian. She's not herself and she needs you." I nodded, though the truth was, I wasn't sure what I was walking into. I wasn't sure what I was going to find when I stepped inside that room, but I couldn't turn back. I had come this far. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. Clarissa was lying in the bed, pale and fragile, her eyes closed as if she were lost in some private world. The woman who had once been strong, confident, and so full of life now looked broken, a shell of the person she had been. The sight hit me harder than I expected. I had prepared myself for this moment, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of seeing her like this. She opened her eyes as I walked closer, and for the first time in months, I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Regret, pain. And in that moment, it hit me. She wasn't the same person who had betrayed me. She wasn't the same woman I had walked away from. She was someone who had been lost, and now she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. "Julian," she whispered, her voice weak, strained. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this, how to make up for everything I've done." I stood there looking at her for a long moment, trying to process the sight before me. The woman who had torn my world apart was now the one who needed saving. But this wasn't about saving her. This wasn't about rekindling what we had. It was about finding peace for both of us. "I'm here, Clarissa," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I'm not here to fix you. I'm here because I need to hear you say what I've been waiting to hear. I need you to understand what you did. And I need you to understand that I'm not the same person who walked away from you." Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded, her fingers trembling as she reached out toward me. "I know, Julian, I've hurt you, and I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've been lost without you, and I don't know how to fix myself, but I need to try." I stood there for a moment longer, watching her. The anger I had once felt was gone. The betrayal had been real, but the hurt didn't define me anymore. I wasn't here to fix her, and I wasn't here to go back to the life we had. I was here to make sure we both had the closure we needed to move on. I nodded. You've hurt me, Clarissa. You've hurt me in ways that I can't forget, but I can't keep carrying that pain anymore. We both have to let go. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Clarissa whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Julian. And as I left that room, I realized something. I wasn't walking away from her anymore. I wasn't walking away from the past. I was simply walking toward the future. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.